All right, so super excited to be back here at the Summer Fancy Food Show. As Leana mentioned, we've come multiple years talking about the industry trends that are impacting the specialty food industry. And we will be diving into which brands and what characteristics of these brands are really winning in the marketplace. So love to get a little bit of a, please raise your hand if you are a CPG manufacturer. All right, so a decent crowd. Anyone in food service or food service related, okay? And how about grocery retail? All right, so we have a pretty mixed crowd. That's great because we're going to be addressing all of these segments in the specialty food industry. So quickly introduce myself and ask Leana and Sunny to introduce themselves as well. I'm Brian Choi, Managing Partner and CEO of the Food Institute. The Food Institute is the Bloomberg of the food and beverage industry. We cover manufacturing, food service, and retail. Leana?
Leana Salamah. I am the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications for the Specialty Food Association. We are, of course, the producer of the Summer Fancy Food Show and Winter Fancy Fair. In addition, we are a 365-day-a-year membership organization with resources and education for folks looking to break into or grow in the specialty food market.
And I'm Sunny, CEO co-founder of MenuData. We're a data insights platform fusing together data from food service, restaurant menus, social media, and retail insights.
Great. All right, so I think we want to start off, where are we from an economic and a consumer perspective? I think it's always great to have the data really powering the US economy and the consumer. So one thing I wanted to first start off is looking at where we are from a US growth perspective. This is a 10-year outlook, looking on a quarterly basis. You can see the big up and down bar charts right around 2020. We all know what that is, the COVID-19 pandemic. One thing I want to say is that when we look at the US economic growth from a 10 to 20-year perspective, about 10 years ago, we easily could see 3 to 4% GDP growth. Currently, we're around 2%, and as of the latest quarter, 1.6%. So the good news, we're not in recession, but we are at a slower pace of growth, and I think that's really important to understand that as the US economy sort of slows down, it impacts consumers and it impacts businesses like the specialty food manufacturers that we see at today's show. When we look at consumer confidence, I think this is the one chart that I would want to highlight. We are near 10-year lows as it relates to consumer confidence. So this is looking at the University of Michigan Consumer Confidence Index. Historically, it's been around 100. So when we're around the 90 and 100 mark, it really shows that consumers are confident about their economic situation. They want to spend. They feel optimistic about the economy. Usually, higher numbers mean more propensity to spend, right? When it's closer to the 50 mark, which is where we are today, they're very cautious. And I think one thing I would mention to all the retailers, manufacturers out there, even food service operators, consumers are being hyper-focused on what they're spending their money on, right? So one thing I would say is that if you have an okay product, okay isn't good enough. It has to stand out from the marketplace. If you're a food service operator, your product and your menu offering has to be exceptional, right? You want to keep that foot traffic coming in through your doors. And then for the retailers out there, you really have to understand the data from a real-time perspective. What's the foot traffic? And we're going to be talking a little bit about these three segments over the next few charts. Leana mentioned there are 4 macro trends impacting the specialty food industry today. So I'm going to start from the top left and go clockwise. So we mentioned during the Winter Fancy Fair that this is the year of the challenger brands. So what do we mean by that? These are brands that are upstart brands. They're newer in the market. They're resonating with consumers. And this is opposed to some of the big, large CPG companies and manufacturers out there. There are a couple of things that are driving this trend. Number one, the consumer wants something new. They're tired of seeing the same old products on shelf, right? And especially when you look at the millennial and Gen Z crowd, They want to know and taste something new, something bold, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that. Moving on to the top right, consumers are value obsessed. Now, when I say value obsessed, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're only looking at the price point, but as I mentioned, they are auditing every part of their spend. So they want to buy something that gives them a little bit more than what is currently offered in the marketplace. So that could be something related to health. Maybe it's a global flavor. Maybe it's a specific ingredient. So they want to know that what they're purchasing is something that is unique and above and beyond what they're currently seeing in the marketplace. On the bottom right, health and wellness. So there's two parts of health and wellness. So last in the Winter Fancy Fair, we talked about the role that GLP-1 drugs had on the marketplace. So this continues to be evolving in consumers. So not only is there the injectable form of the GLP-1 drugs, now there is a pill version that they just introduced a couple of months ago, so making it easier for consumers to have a GLP-1 diet. That affects eating behavior and drinking behavior. On the flip side, and we're going to be delving into this, and Leana's going to be talking a little bit about this as well, they want to know what they're putting in their body. So they are looking at the labels, they're looking at the ingredients, making sure every part of the ingredients fits their health and wellness journey. And then last but not least, on the bottom left, we are seeing a global flavor explosion. I was walking the halls yesterday. There's been probably a 10 to 15% increase in the number of Indian food, South Asian food, Vietnamese food, right? So consumers want that global flavor. And so we're going to delve into that and talking about some of the micro trends that's impacting the industry. So again, this impacts CPG, this impacts retail, this impacts food service. These slides will be made available, so no need to furiously write down your notes. This will be made available to you all today.
So in addition to what Brian's speaking of, these 4 macro trends, there are 6 consumer trends that we introduced at Winter Fancy Fair that really seek to give nuance to some of the ways that consumers are eating or some of the things that they're seeking out in their eating experience. So the Fancy Forecast identified 6 key behaviors and preferences, among them sense maxing, honest processing, shelf-stable chic, an appetite reset, promiscuous palate, and rooted rituals. For purposes of today, we're just going to touch upon 3 of them and how they relate back to what Brian's talking about. So first up is sense maxing. For those folks who were with us in San Diego, you may know that sense maxing was our 2026 trend of the year. Sense maxing is really about taking some of the different flavor nuances, flavor profiles, textures, and really putting them on steroids. Consumers are looking for something very assertive and something they can really feel. And we like to joke about this and say that it's almost kind of a reminder that we continue in this age of AI to be sensory human beings. And there's still some things that we can do that the machines can't. And among them are feel and experience, heightened flavors, heightened sensations, and heightened textures.
All right, so what does sense maxing look like as it relates to CPG, food service, and retail? So one, the chewy and the gummy type of texture. All right, so in particular in the confectionery space, we're seeing a lot of gummies that kind of cater to the different types of mouthfeel, right? Whether it's cupcake bites, whether it's sour cherries, these offer new types of textural and flavor profiles that typically we don't see in that type of category. Number 2, crunchy and crispy. All right, so this type of feel, and we're seeing it across even some of the aisles here, consumers want that extra type of crunch and crispiness. So whether that's like a fried chicken, that's super crunchy fried chicken, or whether it's a cracker. So then one great example is Firehawk cookies, or those crackers. It's super crunchy, right? They're looking for that type of mouthfeel, right? And this is what's resonating with consumers today. Airy and light, right? So for those that don't want to consume a lot of calories, but just be based on the shape of what they're eating, something that's less dense and has an airy light texture. Freeze-dried products are also really resonating that fit that category. Smooth and creamy, right? The Godiva truffles, Lindt Excellence chocolates, and something a little bit more interactive. So we're going to be showing some examples of that a little bit later in the presentation.
One thing that's interesting, Brian, when we presented Sense Maxing at Winter Fancy Fair, one of the folks on the panel talked about how, in the English language, we're really limited in how many ways we talk about texture. In some of the, Asian cultures, there are something like 150 to 200 different words for texture. Right. So Brian's kind of laid out, some of the basics here, but texture just permeates everything, and it has so many different nuances to it and ways that people think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, there's one example that I was walking the aisles yesterday, the popping bobas, right? What was traditionally originated in sort of the bubble tea, now it's making its way across food service and other types of products. So again, another example of that. Sweet and sour, right? Some prefer sweet, some are more, they want more mystery flavors that they're not used to seeing on shelves. Sour candy is another example. We're seeing 7% growth in dollar sales, 1.2% in unit sales, 2.5% in volume. And then also looking at some of the fruity, different types of fruit, dragon fruit, guava, passion fruit. Spice is also continues to resonate with consumers. And we're going to talk, and Sunny's going to be talking about that a little bit later on these slides. So if there was one page that I really like, again, this is pretty, basic. Consumers want spark, they want excitement, and they want adventure, okay? And this is really driven most by the millennial and that Gen Z crowd, but, anything that's new, something that's different, offering bold flavors, different textures, this is what, the demographics they want. And just to let you guys know, millennial and Gen Z pretty much make up 50% of the US population, right? We're talking about 150 million people. So look, I think this is a great opportunity. If you're a brand, if you're a food service operator, Sense Maxing is what consumers want in 2026. I mentioned freeze-dried candy. Who would have thought that, the CAGR, the compound annual growth rate of freeze-dried candy, it's about 9%. Leading up to 2023. A lot of it is driven by social media. There's one great stat here where, just in 2024 versus 2025, there's been over 100% increase in consumers posting about their freeze-dried candy experience. And this is what's driving consumers today, right? We're seeing some of the large CPG players like, the M&Ms and Ferrera introducing this type of snack. So again, this is not just the big manufacturers, small and emerging brands, and I've seen a lot already on the aisles today and yesterday. This is becoming a new hot area within the confectionery space. Gummies. This is a very unique product. So this is a multi-textural type of product where the outer layer is a gummy, has a gummy consistency. Once you pass through the gummy consistency, there is this sort of liquid type of flavor, right? So you have two different types of mouthfeel in a product. And keep in mind, in a better for you type of product relative to what's out there in the marketplace, there's been a 28% increase in this type of product. And so, again, just want to highlight a couple of examples. What's winning in the marketplace? This multi-texture Sense Maxing experience is what we're seeing. And it's not just in CPG, it's also in food service as well.
Yeah, on the food service side, there's three great examples here. The first one from Zaxby's, where it's kind of a strawberry milkshake, but then it also has that crunch as well, right? So we are even seeing this, even pop up in beverages where you might see a gummy inside of it, right? Culver's has the Skittles popped concrete mixer as well. And then even Dominique Ansel has a sorbet, with watermelon. And it is kind of this textural experience that's really unique, so.
Yeah, and if you're able to convey this sort of Sense Maxing experience, it commands a premium price point. So whether in food service or on retail, this sort of sense Maxing type of experiential characteristic will help the bottom line.
So just a few examples. Now, while we talk a lot about, there's some large food service chains that are doing this, there are some large CPG brands doing this, a lot of this stuff starts in specialty. And we've spent some time focusing on the confectionery arena, but certainly anyone who was in the Marcus Samuelsson keynote this morning heard quite a bit about how sensory experiences are driving savory dishes as well. So just to highlight a few of our members who are really capitalizing on sense maxing, intentionally or unintentionally. Certainly folks are aware of Rotten. They've been out there in the marketplace and causing quite a bit of buzz. Our Arctic Farms and then our Acai Mochi Gummies. So these are just a few examples of how specialty is leading the way on sense maxing in the world.
Yeah, and talking about challenger brands, so the Acai Mochi Gummies, look at the packaging, right? The red, bold packaging with the gold font. This, from a visual perspective, so not only the packaging, once you taste the product, you taste a cleaner, gummy product than basically what I'm always used to growing up as a child, right? One of the interesting things with the founder, Mikashino, she developed this product because she has kids and she wanted to, give a better, healthier, gummy experience to her kids, right? So again, tying in the challenger brands, tying in the, the health and wellness, trends, she's been able to develop a product that is going absolutely with exponential growth in 2026.
I find that so often in specialty, products are created or generated or conceived based on wanting to do something for a loved one, whether it's someone who can't have gluten or someone who you want to, create a better candy for a child. They're not, these things are not, and maybe this is why challenger brands really step up, is they're not focus grouped, kind of, are we leaving money on the table types of things. They come from a really authentic place of, this is something that I want to create for people who I love and care about, and it just so happens that when you create food that way, it tends to take off in a really, in a really big way.
Absolutely.
So moving on to the next trend that we're going to spend a couple minutes on here, which is shelf-stable chic. So the idea of this is really steeped in, there's certainly a packaging aspect to it that's very important, but some of it is also about product quality and elevation of those things that we've normally tucked away behind a closed door. We have, different staples out there now that are designed to be seen and that are designed for people to use as they build their social media and their day-to-day personality and personal brands through the types of food that they consume and through showing off the types of quality that they're putting into their bodies and that they're sharing with their families.
Absolutely. So when we look at the shelf-stable market, we're projected to see north of 7% growth over the next 5 years, right? So this is one example, the Hoji Blanca. This is a premium Spanish olive oil. And, here at, in my household, we probably have multiple brands of olive oil. Just a different brand from a different region changes the flavor profile of what you're cooking at home. So again, this shelf-stable chic micro trend is probably one of the most disruptive trends that we will continue to see over the next 12 to 24 months. Modern shoppers want modern needs. Okay, so we mentioned a little bit about the consumer confidence and just where consumers are. So 62% of consumers, they are concerned with where grocery prices are headed. But one of the interesting things is that north of 80% of consumers, they feel like they're more in control. So why the dichotomy? Consumers are very selective of what they're spending money on, right? So instead of going to one retail store and getting all the items, they're being very intentional and deliberate. Maybe on a Monday, they're going to Trader Joe's. Maybe on a Wednesday, they're going to Whole Foods. Maybe on a Friday or a Saturday, which is where my wife and I go, we like to go to Costco, right? So they are being very selective on what they're spending their money on. And so that's why they want to feel more in control. And the shelf-stable part is really super interesting.
And I think part of that, really just the fact that if you are trying, as a mom myself, as you're faced with your grocery bill and you're trying to figure out how to spend your money, certainly it feels very, very comfortable to spend more on non-perishables, right? That you don't have to worry about my kids aren't home for 5 days straight and something goes bad in the fridge. So as non-perishables have become such a higher quality and such a more kind of pervasive, brand statement, I think it goes along with this idea of people really shopping smarter.
Absolutely. And the private label part of the industry currently makes about 20% of food and beverage, we're projecting that this private label trend will go up to probably 30 and north of 30% over the next 3 to 5 years. Consumers are now finding that private label compete with a lot of the national brands. And in some cases, consumers now think private label, they're even better than the national brands, right? At a price point that's probably 10 to 20% sub the national brand prices. So again, this private label part of the industry is absolutely exploding. A lot of it due to that value obsession trend. So consumers are trading up, right? There are multiple different categories like pantry staples. 16% of consumers have already upgraded their pantry staples with some of these higher quality and these disruptive private label and shelf stable chic brands, right? Two really great examples. There's a canned tuna or fish company called Fishwife, right? So again, this is not your grandmother's sardine type of product. This is a higher quality, better for you, and even again looking at the packaging, they're really disrupting this tinned fish can product category. We're seeing double digits growth in brands like Fishwife. Cloud 23 is another one, organic hot sauces. So it's not, I would say probably 2 to 3 years ago, people really focused on getting that extra level of heat just for the heat's sake because it offered that sensory experience. Now there's nuances in the type of heat that they're looking for, right? And Cloud 23 offers that kind of premium type of heat with a different type of heat experience. Olive oil, right? Who would have thought olive oil was going to see a significant amount of growth, and especially the extra virgin olive oil, right? We're seeing 2% growth in dollar shares, 9.1% growth in the olive oil, extra virgin olive oil category relative to the other brands. Vinegar, right? Again, a staple product that we don't really think too much about, but we're seeing disruption in the vinegar category. I mentioned tin fish. We're seeing 3.2% growth in the tin fish category, unit sales, and one specific tin fish, sardines. Who eats sardines, these days? But we're seeing a resurgence in the sardine category, 22.6% growth in sardines, right? And again, it's just super interesting, and Leana will talk about it.
Well, there's a sense maxing play there, right, with the sardines, something a little different, a little funkier. So certainly from, again, an SFA standpoint, we have had high-quality, shelf-stable products here at the Fancy Food Show and in the specialty food industry for forever. But certainly they're getting a resurgence, and again, some examples of our folks who are members of SFA and here on the show floor. And some of it, Brian talked about packaging, and prior to being here, I spent some time in the International Housewares Association. I remember when housewares all of a sudden came out of the cabinets and cutting boards were designed to be seen, they were designed to be displayed, they become part of who you are. And that's really what we're seeing now with a lot of these pantry products is it's becoming incredibly chic to have them on your counter, to feature them in your social media, and to have them part of your brand personality. So what you guys are doing with packaging, in addition to the quality of your products, is just really phenomenal.
Great.
Okay, and then the last trend we're going to spend a few minutes on is honest processing. So this is, I guess, our attempt to talk about processing without being black and white about it. Processing is okay. It's just that people want to understand it. Consumers are hyper aware of additives and things that they don't want in their food. But they also recognize that processing is a normal part of the production of their food. So it's really about doing it in an honest and transparent way, where sometimes there's imperfections that they see, and that's okay. And sometimes there's nuances to it that they're going to recognize or not recognize, but that's okay. If they understand the processing that goes into it, and that processing is based on delivering a better product and not on, fortifying it with, protein powder or, making it last for 30 years. That processing that goes into creating a really high quality product is perfectly acceptable and highly desirable.
Absolutely. So consumers are reading the label like never before, right? And it's not just the moms and the dads. Gen Z and millennials, they are looking at the label And the technology is there where they can scan a QR code and know exactly what's in the product, right? They're very distrustful about what companies say, or they're looking at the data themselves. They're very savvy on finding what's real, what's not real. So Americans, yeah, they are hyper-focused on food safety, right? Women a little bit more than the men, as one would expect. But yeah, so men and women, about 30% are very concerned. Another 50% are somewhat concerned. Yeah, this continues to be a massive trend in consumers, and they're looking it up on Google. What is processed? What is unprocessed? Right? Most of you are probably well aware. At the beginning of this year, the HHS came up with a new food pyramid, right? And they sort of put it in an upside-down pyramid, and they are being hyper-focused on reducing the amount of processed and ultra-processed foods, right? And it's making its way across the consumer spectrum. And so, like I said, this is just a Google Trends search showing continued rise in consumers wanting to know more about what they're putting into their body. Health and wellness, as I mentioned, one of the macro trends at the beginning of this presentation, continues to be a major driver of where consumers are headed, not just in CPG, but also in food service as well. And Sunny's going to be talking about a couple of the examples a little bit later on. The first thing consumers do, they want to choose a healthier option. 48%, they compare nutrition labels. 19% choose what's familiar. So again, what are consumers doing? How are they picking their product? A lot of times they're basing it on what types of ingredients are in their products that they're finding on retail. And like I said, consumers are losing trust in what they're seeing on social media. So they are verifying what they're putting into their body, right? Just because you have a social media influencer saying something is healthy, they're also validating that themselves, right? And there's technology out there, as I mentioned, that can help them validate that. So Sunny's going to talk a little bit about some of the categories that he's seeing as well.
Yeah, I mean, especially with yogurt, right? We're seeing just increase in sales that you wouldn't expect, right? Especially with Icelandic yogurt or Skyr. It's doing exceptionally well. It's higher protein. But I think also the Greek yogurt, I think, even on Saturday, I was walking down the street, I saw a huge line at Mika, right? And there's this idea of can you premiumize this frozen Greek froyo? And we're seeing that pop up on TikTok. And I think it also ties into the health and GLP-1 trend as well. So, yeah, and then even on nuts and seeds, right? We're seeing kind of all sorts of different premium nuts doing well, sales increases of pumpkin and sunflower, even included in butters as well. And then that sort of ties into alternative milks, right? The tiger nut milk coming from North Africa. I think that's really unique how it's incorporating global flavors, and then even the Brazil nut milk doing extremely well, especially in food service.
Yeah, so it's interesting when you kind of look at the milk category. Soy milk had its moment, right? Then you had almond milk had its moment. Then oat milk had its moment. Is tiger milk the next wave, right? So we're seeing new evolutions of better for you milk products out there. So it's super interesting to see, what data we're able to see in real time.
Yeah, and, even with smoothies, right? You kind of, smoothies had kind of the big QSR moment, but now we're seeing even more premium ingredients being brought in, whether that's spirulina, whether that's Erewhon's, $19 smoothies. But we are continuing to see that growth in food service, but more of an upscale type of smoothie.
Yeah, I think that this trend is one in particular that really, again, I'm saying about all of them, but really that specialty food as a category and as an industry has really led the charge on for a long time now. I mean, if you think about, all the, less processed and kind of the better versions of food, they tend to exist at the specialty level before they go mainstream. And I think for consumers today, as they are really becoming far more values-driven in how they want to eat and what types of food they want to feel good about buying, they want to feel good about sharing it with their families. They want to feel good about putting it in their body. I mean, these are the types of values, in addition to things like, responsibility, that they're really paying attention to when they think about their food. So just as a, spotlight of a couple of our members here who are really doing it in a very kind of natural way, natural meaning, more direct and honest and trustworthy processing. You can actually see, it's not blended to death, right? Or it's not kind of, you see some separation, you see some imperfections, and actually that just proves the point that it's actually a little bit closer to the source. For anyone who was here yesterday and got a chance to stop in on the Good Food Mercantile, that's a whole group of folks in the SFA ecosystem who are actually producing food based on a set of standards related to sustainable farming, animal husbandry, workers' rights, and these types of things. So the way food gets produced, the manner in which it gets produced, the values under which it gets produced are incredibly important to the consumers that are up and coming here.
And as Leana said, we are publishing these monthly reports. Every month you can find them on the SFA website. We just touched upon 3, but definitely feel free to check out the website to find out some of the other microtrends that we're seeing in 2026. And as an announcement, we mentioned this at the Winter Fancy Fair. SFA now has as a member benefit the MenuData Data Insights platform. Normally, this type of access to data will cost tens of thousands of dollars per month, per company. We are making it available in partnership with SFA for any member, any food service operator, any retailer. If you're a member of SFA, you will have access to this platform. And we are just starting our phase 3 platform, which Sunny will talk a little bit more about right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, part of what a lot of these brands need is data to help them build their case on retailers that they might want to get into, or data to help build the case on how can I get into food service. And by combining and personalizing these trends and making it prescriptive to your brand, we can sort of bring the data to life in a way that you guys can actually use to bring in more business. So.
Which I think is critical. I mean, a lot of our members are organizations that aren't large enough to have a research and analytics team who can comb through data and figure out what it's telling them and figure out how to interpret it and apply it to the business. So we're really trying to take that extra step to make it really actionable for our members. As Brian mentioned, we're doing this in a phased pilot rollout throughout 2026, where we are bringing about 100 SFA members into the fold to kick the tires with us on a monthly basis, with the goal of just refining and improving the product until we're ready to launch it to all SFA members in 2027. So again, this is a free member benefit, and membership in the SFA is a three-digit number. It's $300, it's $500. So it is really, we are incredibly pleased as a nonprofit organization to be able to offer this.
Yeah, so if you're interested, definitely email memberbenefits@specialtyfood.com, and we'll put your name and your company on the list of companies. So this report, there's a bigger report related to this presentation. You can look at the QR code. The report is available if you want to do a deep dive. And then, thank you to MenuData, to SFA, for partnering with us.